This video was requested by a patron. Patrons in the top tier can not only get early access to videos before they go live, but get the ability to request future video topics for me to cover. See how you can become a patron by clicking the card in the upper right corner, or the link in the description below. And now, on with our feature presentation. The story of Nick Foles winning a Super Bowl with the Philadelphia Eagles in just a short half-decade has already been etched into NFL history, and will live on forever in the lore of Philadelphia sports. Here's Foles, a backup quarterback, forced to come off of the bench in relief for Carson Wentz, who was the odds-on favorite to win MVP before this, and who was returning to Philadelphia after being traded away by the team a few short years before. And now, even though 2 months before the big game, no one thought anything of him, he helped guide the Eagles to their first Super Bowl win in franchise history, by not only winning the MVP of the Super Bowl, by not only getting revenge on the team that beat them at the Super Bowl more than a decade ago at Super Bowl 39, by not only catching a touchdown pass in one of the most iconic plays in the history of the big game, and in the history of the NFL, but by also throwing for 373 yards and 3 touchdowns in the process. Nick Foles is an Eagles legend, and I think that goes without saying. But here's the crazy thing about the career of Nick Foles, which is still going on to this day. We were dangerously close to having none of that happen. If you asked Foles 2 years beforehand where he would be on the night of February 4th, 2018, he'd probably say that he'd be on his couch watching the game at home, with his football career well behind him at that point. Because what you might not realize about Nick Foles is that he was dangerously close to announcing his retirement from the NFL, and never playing again. The Super Bowl win? The insane $80 million contract with the Jaguars afterwards? Philly? The life of Nick Foles nearly took a very different path after the 2015 season concluded. Because this is the in-depth story behind how Nick Foles almost prematurely retired from the NFL. Before I talk about the 2016 offseason and what exactly was weighing on his mind, we need some context to understand what transpired in 2015 that made Foles' career completely flip on its head. The year is 2015, and a blockbuster trade has just been made that you don't see too often in the NFL. One starting quarterback getting traded for another. After 3 seasons with the Philadelphia Eagles, third-round pick and Arizona alum Nick Foles was traded to this team right here, the St. Louis Rams, in exchange for Sam Bradford. The trade was relatively surprising. On one hand, Foles only had 1 year left on his contract, and the Eagles wanted to get something for Foles just in case he left in free agency, or in case they didn't want to commit a ton of money to him if they could execute the trade-up for Marcus Mariota. Plus, Foles, after a great 2013 season where he made the Pro Bowl by throwing 27 touchdowns and just 2 interceptions, and had a record-tying 7-touchdown game against the Oakland Raiders, regressed pretty badly in 2014, and missed the second half of the season with a broken collarbone. On the other hand, Foles went 14-4 in his 18 starts with the Eagles under head coach Chip Kelly, and the nature of this trade was rather bizarre, especially because the Eagles were giving up a second-round pick to the Rams for a quarterback in Sam Bradford, who was at the time regarded by many as worse than Foles. However, Foles would have a new beginning in St. Louis, as he was the man in charge of guiding the Rams back to the playoffs for the first time since the 2004 season, more than a decade before. However, as you can probably tell, yeah, that did not happen. Not in the slightest bit. Because what followed for Foles was an absolutely turbulent season where everything that could have gone wrong did. In 2015, the Rams once again pulled off the signature Jeff Fisher special by going 7-9, and Foles was absolutely atrocious under center. In his 11 starts with the team, the Rams went just 4-7, as Foles threw just 7 touchdowns and 10 interceptions, with a touchdown-to-interception ratio below 1. For some perspective on how bad that was back in 2015, there were 33 quarterbacks in football to attempt at least 250 passes. Of those 33, 31 of them had a positive touchdown to interception ratio. The only two that didn't were Peyton Manning, whose arm was basically dead by this point, and Nick Foles. And of those 33 aforementioned quarterbacks, Foles threw the fewest touchdown passes of them all. In the final 10 games that Foles started with the team, the Rams averaged just 14.2 points per game, and this was at a time when teams were averaging 23 points per game. With Foles under center, the Rams were more than a full possession behind the league-wide average. Foles was so bad that he wound up getting benched for Case Keenum toward the end of the season. And just like that, it seemed as though the Nick Foles experiment in St. Louis, and in the team's final season in St. Louis for that matter, was about to end as quickly as it began. To say that the 2015 season was a rough one for Foles would be putting it lightly. It was just a combination of a bunch of different things. There was the poor play and the poor record. There was the shock from the trade itself, especially since starting quarterbacks never expect to be traded, and this felt like a blindside. Said Foles, "I did not expect the trade," and that's the truth. His mind didn't seem to be in the right place. Said head coach Jeff Fisher when he decided to bench Foles for Keenum, "Nick just needs a break." His wife, Tori, was sick around this time and was dealing with POTS, which in essence is a malfunction dealing with the involuntary functions of the body. And when you combine all of that, as well as his benching, as well as his faith, seeing as he said from day one that he would have a post-football career as a pastor, so he had a plan after football, and the injuries that he had suffered through his first 4 seasons, he was ready to hang it up and call it a career. When the now-named Los Angeles Rams traded up for the number 1 pick in the NFL draft and took Cal quarterback Jared Goff, officially signaling the end of the Nick Foles experiment, Foles didn't show up to organize team activities and didn't do any work on the off-season programs. Jeff Fisher was trying his best to keep Foles on the team in some capacity, especially since he signed a 2-year contract extension for over $24 million the year before. But as Fisher said, "I've had conversations with Nick. We're trying to work things out. That's all I can say." Shortly after, Foles was released and was now a free agent, not tied to any team whatsoever. And that's when, in essence, he decided to hang it up, or at the very least, think it over. Foles said on this free agency period and the possibility of walking away, "I sat there and talked with my wife. You go through a lot of emotions. Changing teams, being traded, going there, going through that year, and once I was a free agent, we just sort of sat there and said, hey, what do we want to do?" It was the first time I had been a free agent in my career, and it was the first time I had to make a decision, because I was drafted and traded. I was leaning toward not playing and stepping back. Foles even went as far as going on a camping trip, isolated from everyone except his brother, who accompanied him on the trip, and not even the slightest bit focused on the game itself. Foles would later say on how bad his time with the Rams was, and everything that went wrong in 2015, "After my time with a certain NFL team, I wanted to retire. I wanted to retire from the NFL, and I really struggled. I couldn't pick up a football for about 8 months. I had no love for the game." And even though other teams called now that Foles was a free agent and were interested in bringing him on as a backup, Foles had no desire to go back. At least, not yet. Because something would change during that offseason, and it came from a familiar source of inspiration to him, and to a lot of players for that matter: the Bible. In the Bible, in 2 Corinthians 12:9, Paul says, "But he said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness.' Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me." Now, this wasn't the first time that a quarterback cited 2 Corinthians 12:9 in pondering the future of his NFL career. As you might have guessed, Tim Tebow cited this exact biblical passage in 2013 after getting cut by the Patriots, thanking the team and continuing his pursuit of trying to make it in the NFL as a quarterback. But what does this passage mean, especially in the context of Nick Foles and what his situation was? Well, the line, "My strength is made perfect in weakness," is a really powerful one, and one that resonated with Foles. In essence, it means that any struggles you face and any hardships you go through, God is going to be there. The times of weakness aren't when God abandons you. That's when He's there for you, and that's when His faith is going to get you through whatever you're going through. His faith is enough. Believe in God and all that He is capable of, and no matter what you're going through, everything's going to be okay. That's one of the most common interpretations of that famous passage, and it's one that Foles really took to heart, especially since he was a devout follower of Christ. As Foles said on the importance of that scripture in shaping his decision, "I kept reading scripture. I kept praying. I kept asking God." And so many of us ask God for signs. We ask God, "Hey, please just put it on the wall. Like, I want to know." But that's not how it works. He's not always going to do that. He was shaping me. He was bringing me down to my knees. At that moment, through that prayer of 2 Corinthians 12:9, he said, "Hey, just take a step of faith. You're either going to stop playing the game of football, and you're going to go on to a different area of your life, and I'm going to be with you, and I'm going to be the most important thing in your life, or you're going to step back into football, and you're going to continue to play. And I'm going to be there with you every step of the way, and you're going to play to glorify me." Once Foles read that passage and really took it to heart, he became reinvigorated with the game again. He wanted to go back on the gridiron and play for God, because he knew that God would have his back in life, no matter how hard things might have seemed after everything went wrong in 2015. In 2018, Foles would say on his Instagram what he interpreted that passage to mean, saying, "Don't be afraid to make a mistake or fail. That's how you learn and grow. And growing is a good thing. Weak moments just mean you have to depend less on yourself and more on Christ." In other words, so what if you fail? God's going to be there to help you get back up and try again. God's going to be there for you. God's going to help you come out of this a stronger, a better, and a more faithful man. And as Foles would later say on that verse, this verse has brought so much meaning to my heart and in my life. With the scripture inside of him, Foles decided that he wasn't ready to give up football just yet. God didn't want him to do that. That wasn't his path. He signed with the Kansas City Chiefs, reuniting with head coach Andy Reid, who was his head coach back in 2012 with the Philadelphia Eagles when he was first drafted. And I guess the rest, as they say, is history. After one season backing up Alex Smith with the Chiefs, he rejoined the Philadelphia Eagles, who now had Doug Peterson as their head coach. And one injury to Carson Wentz later, and Nick Foles became one of the biggest heroes in Philadelphia sports history, bringing the Vince Lombardi Trophy to the city of brotherly love for the first time ever. The funny part about all of this, or I guess the bizarrely coincidental part about it, was that all the way back in 1969, the Philadelphia Inquirer called 2 Corinthians 12:9 the golden text. When something's referred to as the golden of anything, it usually means the most important, or the most pivotal, or the most crucial. And it's funny how Philadelphia's biggest newspaper said this nearly half a century before the Eagles won the Super Bowl. Obviously, they didn't mean it like that. But now, in more ways than one, 2 Corinthians 12:9 was the golden text in Philadelphia. Because without it, Nick Foles doesn't play in the NFL again, and the Eagles are still left without a Super Bowl. And that's how one Bible passage changed NFL history forever. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.